I call the member for Hasluck.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Migration Legislation Amendment Offshore Processing and Other Measures Bill because what I find is the direction of thinking now has changed considerably since the 28th of June, when on that particular day we heard incredible positions being presented to this House by members. It was a culmination of those who met to discuss ways in which we could broker a solution to a problem that was costing lives, to a problem where the ships were coming unabated to our shores, where our processes of border protection had broken down, and where we had a Prime Minister who was absolutely stubborn in her resolve not to take the opportunity of the goodwill that prevailed on that day for the solutions that would be feasible. What I found distasteful was the couple of days after that, with the media headlines of drowning in a sea of indecision, the comments that lives, not politics, the issues that constituents in my electorate raised about the anger of indecision, but also the anger in the fact that this Parliament had not reached a position that was addressing a very critical and key issue that impacted on the security of this country and its borders. But equally, there was concern about the rising costs. Who was going to provide the levels of support that would be needed by those who came from countries where there was strife, turmoil and war? And then how do you take forward those people into Australian society where they are genuine refugees? But equally, there was some anger about the fact that I have many who have come from overseas and now live in my electorate who were seeking family reunions and who were being told that it was not possible. And we dealt with a number of visa applications, and people, when they got their responses, would retort by saying, maybe I should go and jump on a vessel and come in. It's my way of getting into this country. The thing that disappointed me personally was the fact that we had an opportunity, that we had a moment in time in which there were some very strong, unified voices from across both sides of the chamber that were seeking a solution. And even in my own appeal to the Prime Minister to show some leadership as the Prime Minister and as the key leader of this nation on the issue, she chose not to. On the 28th instead, that evening, she announced an expert panel and said that they would come back to her with solutions or recommendations as to how government would progress. And it's interesting that when you read that report, it doesn't differ significantly from the Howard solutions, that it provides some opportunities for some real concrete decisions to be made. The opening up of Nauru, which previously had been denigrated. And the thing that I dislike is the fact that when you disagree with the Prime Minister, you are then denigrated for having a position that is inconsistent with hers. And yet in this chamber, we all have the opportunity to raise those very things that are absolutely critical, that need to be addressed. I was fascinated when I read back through some of the history. Prime Minister Gillard was against offshore processing and the Pacific solution in opposition. In fact, she said Labor will end the so-called Pacific solution, the processing and detaining of asylum seekers on the Pacific Islands, because it is a costly, unsustainable and wrong as a matter of principle. And that was recorded in Hansard on the 13th of the 5th, 2003. And yet the budgets that we've expended on the asylum seeker challenge have been substantial when you consider the costs of the budget blowout of $4.7 billion, or the $866 million blowout revealed in the 2011-12 budget, and then the subsequent $840 million that was revealed at a later stage. Another comment was Labor committed to abolishing the Pacific solution, and this was one of the first things the Rudd Labor government did on taking office. It was also one of my greatest pleasures in politics. And Senator Chris Evans made that comment to an address at the Refugee Council of Australia at the Parramatta Town Hall. And in hindsight, I often wondered how he felt when you consider what occurred after that decision and the challenges that governments have had in managing the borders. Prime Minister Julia Gillard and Labor have consistently said asylum seekers would never go to a country that hadn't signed the UN Convention. And on Radio 6PR on the 8th of July in 2010, the Prime Minister said, "I would rule out anywhere that is not a signatory to the Refugee Convention." Strange when you consider there was the Malaysian deal, and I'm not casting aspersions on Malaysia, but certainly if you put forward a proposition and you state what you sell as a principle of what you would do and not do, then why do the backflip? Why then look for a solution because of an expediency? I think on the 28th of June, we certainly provided an opportunity for us all to come together to at least deal with the Oakeshott resolution or the motion that he put and the debate that subsequently followed. But again, there was a decision by the leadership of the Gillard government not to canvass anything that resembled a Pacific solution. And that, strangely enough, when an expert panel provides those options and opportunities within their report by way of recommendation, there seems to be a gravitation to that solution and looking at the options as to how we provide for asylum seekers. I think one of the things that has been frustrating is the fact that the Prime Minister has been stubborn in this whole process, that all opportunities to look at solutions were forgone. But I suppose what I do like about the expert panel report are the 22 recommendations that allow flexibility. And the Coalition has always supported a solution that would be based on humanitarian considerations. That the refugee who sought a place in a country like ours, going through the proper processes, would be welcome. But those who had not and who had destroyed documents made it much more challenging to take them through the processes that would allow them to enter our country freely, or at least in stages until they became and were given the opportunity of residing here. The chair of the panel, in handing down the panel's report on Monday the 13th of August, in a sense endorsed the Coalition's approach to stopping the boats, confirming that pull factors created by Labor's policies were significantly responsible for the resumption of the people smugglers' trade under the abolition of the Howard government's proven border policies. None of us support the notion of human trafficking. None of us in this chamber support the notion that people make money off the misery of others. And none of us support that concept that a life has no value, because the number of people that we know that have been lost is significant. What we don't know are those who didn't make it that we're not aware of. The panel made 22 recommendations, and certainly I was pleased to see the offshore processing in Nauru on Manus Island, PNG, to be established as soon as practicable, and then introducing legislation to the Parliament to allow the processing of illegal boat rivals at designated countries, and reserve to the Parliament the provision to allow or disallow the legislative instrument that designates those countries. That whole concept is something that Scott Morrison, as the Shadow Minister with responsibility, continually put as a solution that would have helped the Prime Minister move forward in respect to the issues to do with asylum seekers. And his point about turning back irregular maritime vessels can be operationally achieved and can constitute an effective deterrent to these ventures, that the protections for asylum seekers set out in the Malaysian People Swap are inadequate. The Coalition had an effective policy under the Howard government. Philip Ruddock led those reforms and was one of the key designers, along with Coalition members, certainly Minister Downer and John Howard as the Prime Minister. And the Coalition has always had a plan to stop the boats. It's never reconciled from the proven outcomes that the Howard policies achieved. For 4 years, the Prime Minister said offshore processing at Nauru would not work. For 4 years, Australia's borders have been weak, lives have been lost at sea, and Australia's reputation with its neighbours have been tarnished. Costs have blown out and people smuggling has flourished, all because the Prime Minister was too stubborn to admit Labor got it wrong. The Howard government solutions worked then and they will work again. The solutions that are proposed out of the Houston report are practical and will offer an opportunity for government to implement those things that will work and reduce the number of people coming here through the current manner of people traffickers. And let me also remind the House that in opposition, the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, supported turning back boats. The Navy has turned back 4 boats to Indonesia. They were in seaworthy shape and arrived in Indonesia. It has made a very big difference to people smuggling that happened. And we think turning boats around that are seaworthy, that can make the return journey, are in international waters, fits in with that. And that was a press conference on the 3rd of December 2002. Let me conclude by saying that the Coalition has been consistent with its policy. It has always given government the opportunity to sit and negotiate an agreed outcome that are solutions that reduce the numbers coming, reduce the loss of life, and certainly enables Australia to protect its borders. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.